All right, now that we've learned how to factor polynomials or reviewed how to factor polynomials, we're going to go ahead and learn how to write quadratic equations and also solve quadratic equations by factoring. This will obviously add to our ability that we did while graphing, so we should be able to do it by factoring, and we will learn two other ways to solve quadratics also. All right, so the first thing we have to remember is the zero product property. What is the zero product property? If we have two numbers and we multiply them together and the answer is 0, the only way for that to happen is one of those numbers have to be 0. So I can multiply 3 times 0 or 5 times 0, but one of those has to be 0 in order for it to work. They can both be 0, but that's what the zero product property states. And so if we can get this in factored form, like this example here, where it's two things times each other, we can separate them because they have to equal 0. And since one of them has to be 0, we can solve them both and then get some answers. And so that's what we're going to be trying to go ahead and do here. So let's start trying to factor some trinomials. So here's our first one, x squared minus x equals 2. Now, of course, we can't have it, it's not a two product property, it's a zero product property. So we have to make it set it equal to 0. So we're going to move our 2 over. So we have x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. So now we're going to factor it. Now to factor it, again, remember we do the first number here, the 1 times the negative 2. So we want two numbers that multiply to negative 2, but add up to be that middle one of negative 1. Well, there's not too many combinations. It's 1 and 2. It's just making sure we have the negative in the right spot. So the negative 2 and a positive 1. So since there's no number in front here, we can just go ahead and write our answer. So it's x minus 2 and x plus 1. Remember, those two numbers just get to be put in these x values. So x minus 2 and x plus 1. Now that's set equal to 0. And then using the zero product property, I can split this up. So the x minus 2 equals 0 and the x plus 1 equals 0. Separate those and we get x equals 2 and x equals negative 1. So those are our two answers. So those are the two answers that will make this true. Negative 1 or 2, because we'll get that 0, which will then give us the 0 that we have over here. Let's try another one. All right, c squared minus 16c plus 64 equals 0. Already equals 0, so we're just going to do our multiply. So we want to multiply to 64, but add to negative 16. Well, there's a lot of combinations for 64. 1 and 64, 2 and 32, 3 doesn't go in, but 4 and 16, and we can keep going, but we do get negative 8 and negative 8. So it is possible to have the same numbers like this. So we have x minus 8 and x minus 8 equals 0. Split it using the zero product property, and we get x minus 8 equals 0, and x minus 8 equals 0. Solving both of those, we get 8 and 8. Well, obviously that's the same number, so our answer is just 8. This is the one where, remember, if it goes ahead the graph, it just touches the line, and we only had one answer. That's what this one is. So it only touches the line, and so we only have one answer. All right, what about this one? Again, it's not equal to 0, so we got to move it over. So we have z squared minus 16z equals 0. Now notice this is not a normal trinomial, so we can just factor it with our GCF. So the only thing that's in common is that z, so that z comes in front, and we have z minus 16 left. This is not a difference of squares because it's not z squared. 16 we can take the square root of, that's fine. So we can't split this up any further. So now it is still two things multiplied by each other, so we split it up. So z equals 0, that first number, or z minus 16 equals 0. So we get 0 and 16 for our two different answers. All right, let's try one of the harder ones where we have a number in front. So now we do 2 times 3, which is 6. So two numbers that multiply to 6 that add up to be 5. The only combination is 2 and 3. So remember what we do is we split that middle term into 2 and 3 so that we have 4 terms. We turn this into a grouping problem. So now I take a look at the first two. What's in common here? A 2x. What's left is an x and then a 1. Here I take a 3 out and I'm left with x plus 1. Take the two combinations and we have 2x plus 3 and x plus 1. Split it, 2x plus 3 and x plus 1 equals 0. Solving them both, this is -1. This ends up being -3/2. So those are our two different answers. All right, remember once upon a time we talked about foiling or using the Punnett Square. Both are the same thing. This is just a quick slide to remind you in the kind of transition. Foil, remember, is first, outer, inner, last. If you want to take a look at the slide, I'm not going to spend much time on it because that should be review. All right, so what's happening here is they give us the answer, -3/4 and 5, and they ask what's the quadratic? Can we write the quadratic formula for it, or the quadratic equation? And we can, because we can do this going backwards. So I have x minus 3/4 is one of the answers, and x equals 5. Well, remember what we do, if I go backwards here, to get the answer, to go up a step, I'm going to go ahead and move this over so that it equals, both equal 0. So how do I make it equal to 0? I move it over. So x plus 3/4 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. And then I put them together, so x plus 3/4 times x minus 5. Now I do not like the fraction, so I'm going to get rid of it. The denominator here is 4, so I'm just going to multiply these by 4. So if I multiply this by 4, I get 4x, and this becomes just 3. That is legal because I multiplied this by 4, and I also multiplied this by 4, which doesn't change it any, right? 4 times 0 is just 0. Now I have my binomial, and I could FOIL it out. That's what that last slide was about. Or I can do my Punnett Square. Remember to do Punnett Square, we have x minus 5, and then 4x and 3. Multiply the different spots. So we have 4x squared, -20x, 3x, and -15. Our like terms are here. So 4x squared minus 17x minus 15 equals 0. And that's the quadratic equation that will give me these two answers. All right, let's try one more just to make sure that we got that. So we want 1/2 and -5. So they just skipped ahead to this point. So it's going to be x minus 1/2 and x minus a -5, or x plus 5, right? Now they FOIL it first before getting rid of the fraction. I didn't like the fraction to start with, so I got rid of it first. So I would write this as 2x minus 1. But you can do it either way. They FOIL it out. That just gives us a lot of extra fractions in my book, so I'm not a big fan of it. Then they multiply by 2 to get 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. And that's my answer. And that's what I have for you today.